Everybody. We are live. Welcome to those who have shown up. This is the weekly Strength Club podcast. We have two starting strength coaches here. One of them is named Chase Lindley. One of them is named Alex Casari. I'll let you figure out who's who there. But to this guy in the bottom, the big tall blonde guy, how's it going?
I'm doing well. You look extravagant with your black t-shirt, my fellow man.
Thank you very much. I'm Chase Lindley. I recently just set a bunch of records at the Wichita Fall Athletics Club weightlifting meet. I clean and jerked. I think it was at least 200 pounds. It was pretty cool. But how did that meet go, Chase? Tell us about it.
Oh man, it was good. It was my first Olympic weightlifting meet. It was a nice one because again, everything done at Wichita Falls, Nick, Rip, and all them, they know how to put on a meet. So it was good. It was my first time lifting in a meet where the bar never changes weight; it only increases. So that was kind of a new ordeal to kind of experience. But all in all, I had a really fun time. It was good.
Mm-hmm.
I
So
still
there's
have
not
the bug.
So there's not flights like in powerlifting where it'll go up and
Nope,
down
no
and up and down.
flights.
It's just
Oh,
straight
I
up the
mean,
entire time.
we probably had, I forgot, like 16 to 18 competitors. So
Mm-hmm.
doing flights, I mean, it
Not
could
really
have
worth
been,
it.
yeah, but it really
Yeah.
wasn't.
Yeah, so we have a bunch of videos to go over from Chase's competition, so that'll be cool. We'll do a little breakdown there. Hopefully, we'll get some clips out of it too. But in this episode, we're going to be doing the competition recap, like we talked about, and then pain and injury. But before, we'll do like a little bit of a aside about to what we do on this channel. You should subscribe, like all that jazz. But basically, we kind of felt like there was a little bit of a hole in starting strength content. We have a bunch of articles, a bunch of forum posts, and a bunch of books. Nothing really kind of in the podcast form, at least to go through the basic stuff, right? So it's just like there's starting strength radio. There's a bunch of really like golden episodes on there, like the weightlifting episode and all those things that cover a lot of this stuff super in depth. We won't really touch on that because it's already been done, but we'll go through a lot of this other stuff where people, or we feel like, or at least I've seen people basically asking things. So we have a bench press episode, squat episode, going through all the lifts, a lot of form checks, a lot of Q&A and stuff like that. So go through the archives, see if you like what you see. And then at the end of this episode, we're going to cover pain and injury and then do a bunch of form checks. So to start here, if you want to find any of us, we have Chase at Chase Lindley for Instagram, and then at Chase_Lindley with his backup account. You have my website here at Eco Strength, and then if you want to get videos on the show for form check stuff, you can email support@strength.club, and you can get that in through the Starting Strength app as well. But what we're going to do here is go through some pretty cool stuff. Chase, can you see what's going on here?
Yep.
All right, so this is attempt 1 for our boy Chase.
I think this was 135.
All right, so 135, and then we're going to see a clean and press here, the infamous clean and press. Nice pop off the chest.
Mm-hmm.
Bump. Yeah, buttery smooth, man. And this was the opener. How exactly did you select your opener? What was the thought process for you behind that?
More so just going into this meet, kind of like the final week, I was really beat up. So the original game plan was kind of, maybe hitting somewhere around 150, 155 on a clean press. But, kind of talking to Josh, the guy in the background there, kind of.
Yeah, that's Josh, if you can see my cursor.
Yeah. Kind of brainstorming and throwing ideas off of him. Why not just save something for the clean and jerk or the snatch? Because for kind of the brink of this prep, I was missing my snatch. I wasn't able to rack it. So we're thinking maybe I'm getting beat up, which I figured out is just the way I pull it. And we'll kind of go over into more detail as we get into it. But I thought I was just manhandling and just beating the fuck out of my shoulders. So we kind of, went a little bit more conservative with the attempts, and they all felt pretty good.
Good. Yeah. So, I mean, like, generally, if I ever have an inexperienced person going into a powerlifting meet, it's always going to be the first attempt is going to be something you can hit in your sleep. It's not going to be anything controversial. So this was attempt 2. It started to get a little bit slower there, and then falling forward at the top. Did you get all 3 whites for this one?
I did, but they probably should have called it. I kind of caught it a little bit forward at the top.
Yeah, and just kind of sinks with
you.
A
little bit forward. Yeah, and it just pulled me off balance a little bit.
And then we have our next one in a few 123.30. Right about here. And then what we got in the bar here? We got a few plates now. We got 2 reds and a green, some change.
This was like 147 or so.
Okay, so we got 147 here. And you were thinking originally something in the 50s, right? And then you went with this so you could save some for the clean and jerk?
So my best in training was 160 on the clean and press.
Nice. Kick ass.
So yeah, we again just kind of I felt like I've lost a lot of strength kind of going into this meet because, again, I was so focused on what I need to do with executing the movement and not really training my strength
Hmm.
as much. So I kind of felt like I tapered down too soon with my press. And man, I hit like 140 in training and it was an absolute grinder.
It was a
So I was
grind.
actually really surprised to see this move as well as it did. And I probably should have gone a little bit more, but again, like you're saying, it's good just to kind of go a little bit conservative on your first meet, even though this isn't
Exactly. And
technically
even
my
if it's the
first meet,
first
but
lift.
yeah.
Yeah. Now on the way up here, there is that little bit of the stutter step, and you can see the wrist recalibrating. Did you kind of like consciously think about that? Was that a little bit moved to get that back towards the shoulder, or was that something that just kind of happened automatically?
Yeah, it's automatic, but
Okay.
going into this months prior, just learning the technique, I figured out that you have to have it on your shoulders. There's no way to kind of catch it at this weight and kind of
Yeah.
hold it like how I normally do with a strength lifting meet, because I'm not taking it out of the rack. I got to get it from the floor to my shoulders and then press it up overhead. So the best way to do it, and if you kind of see like the guys back in the day, they just did it from their shoulders too.
Yep. Yeah. Very, very excellent shoulder mobility. The correct forearm length. There's a lot of things that have to happen to make that rack position happen at your
hmm
shoulder. All right. So we'll move on to the snatches then. How'd you feel about the snatches, man?
Going into this, I was a little bit apprehensive. Man, this was like 10 days before the meet. I attempted 120 like at least 10 times, and I could not rack it
So
for
what's
the
on the bar
life of
here
me.
that we're looking at for attempt? I believe this is attempt 2.
This is 110,
Okay.
and then you'll see here in the little bit why I missed the rack so much on my prep here. Um, as you see the bar path here, you'll notice that it didn't even touch my thighs or even come near it. This is the problem that I'm having and I'm trying to work on currently is
I think
just
the one thing
keeping.
I really like is that if whenever you guys are watching this, watch how Chase smiles after he catches all of these.
Yeah, because
He'll stop moving, and then
I
there it
wish you
is.
could see. So the head coach here, his name is Bobby. I've known Bobby since I was 12. Um, he, whenever he saw me go forward, he jumped out of his chair and his eyes got really big, kind of like the deer in headlights type thing.
Yeah.
And I knew, like, in practice, like I always go like right on the edge, like the old cliffhanger movie with, oh fuck, Sylvester Stallone, Life on the Edge type thing.
Hmm.
I always do that, and I walk right on the edge of the platform. But I knew I had it. I've nailed this weight again 100 times in training. It's
Hmm.
just again, you kind of have that weird thought of, man, I don't know about this because again, I've attempted this or 120 rather for like 10 attempts one day, and I just could not rack it. But this was
Hmm.
this was good.
And like you were saying, hip contact was a little bit sparse on this one. You
Yeah.
think? Okay.
Oh yeah. I wish I had the video. I am terrible about videotaping my lifts. I just like to be in the moment, not even think about it. I think about what I need to fix on or fix
Hmm.
rather, and just focus on the cues at hand. Someone videotaped it from the side, and they actually saw like the bar leave like my thighs for about 6 inches.
Yeah, quite early.
Yeah, so then that's why I go at whenever I extend my hips and the bar is carrying up, I go and chase it essentially to rack the bar.
Hmm. There's a picture perfect frame right there. I think you winked at someone.
Yeah, and that was Rip and Josh were talking to me, as I was giving them attempts and just coming back to the judges table. They're like, "Man, you shouldn't be going up that heavy," or just kind of like giving me cues and stuff like that. The problem with cues right then, right there, is that I haven't worked on it,
Mm-mm. Yeah,
or
they're just not going to
I've
do anything.
yeah, or I've heard it a million times, and there's this movement pattern that's already ingrained, and I just got to hope for the best.
Yeah, at that point, it comes down to like during your practice blocks, and it needs to be instruction rather than coaching. Like I think people are surprised whenever you deal with like an advanced athlete how little coaching is done because it's not going to
Yeah.
do anything. You know, it comes down to changing the mental model and then slowly changing the execution.
Yep.
But so now that you finished your second attempt on the snatch, I feel like you could have gone up a little bit more past this. You feel like you
Past
had more in
120.
you on that day. On that day, do you think you had more in you for the snatch?
Maybe 125, 122. Just
Okay.
kind of depends because at this point you can tell like I went even further with walking it out, so it'd be
Hmm.
kind of hard to judge whether I would be able to stay on the platform and
Exactly. Yeah,
not kill
you're
the head ref.
you're 4 inches from the head of the platform.
Yeah.
But it's always a good sign when people can walk the snatch backwards that confidently. It's not crushing you or anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it is a relatively lightweight for you. And then we'll go all the way to the end of this thing. Yeah, you press basically right at the end just with yourself, really.
Yeah. Jay Russo in the chat. Hello, Alex and Chase. And he said, sup.
How's it going, dude?
How's it going, man?
Haven't seen any videos from you in a while, Jay Resso. You guys send that shit in. All right, so we're to the clean and press, or the clean and jerk now. The C and J, the coolest of all the lifts. Actually, which one's your favorite, Chase? Out of all the three.
Man, I actually like the snatch the most because it's
nice.
For me. It's kind of like it's my bane right now. And whenever I master it and I know that I can nail it, it's just like a good fuck you to it. And that's what I like.
It'll feel good. So attempt 1. How smooth did this feel for you? Expectations going into it?
Going into it, I was a little bit tired. I didn't really eat enough prior to the meet, so I was kind of just stuffing my face and slowly just kind of maintaining like that blood glucose level of me not getting too tired and passing out, and having enough basically energy throughout the whole entire meet. So going into this tired, warmed up, felt good though. And then this attempt, man, it felt nice.
Good. Yeah, it's always good to get like a really nice confidence boost at the start of this, which is one of the reasons why I think a lot of coaches really like to softball that first attempt. It should be something that you can hit in your sleep. So attempt number 2, how big was the jump between 1 and 2 for this?
What is this? I think this was 150. So
okay, we got 150.
In training, I usually make these big of jumps. So going on the meet, it doesn't bother me. I'm always take big jumps in between warm-ups or attempts. So the 140 to 150 doesn't bother me.
Good. You're good. And now on this one, how'd you feel about the catch position kind of in the clean itself? Was that a little bit low for you, or is that typical?
Oh yeah, it was shit. I have a hard problem with my cleans getting my elbows fast enough forward. I always feel like I have to death grip the bar, or I'm not consciously thinking about it. I'm thinking about different things at the moment.
The hands
So actually going back into the judging table, I have Rip and Josh yelling at me about my elbows. I'm like, guys, I know I've had this problem since I first started power cleaning. It's not going to fix itself. Like I have to, again, cueing myself what I did in the prep, and that's just essentially just let it fly up, and then don't even think about having arms at this point, and just catching it with my shoulders.
Higher pull, catch it with the chest. Yep. This rack position was a lot better. Yeah, this one I thought was really solid. And then what do we have on the bar here? We got some yellow action.
This was 155.
Big smile at the end. That's always a good finish for the lift.
Yeah, because Josh and Rip wanted me to do 153. I'm like, guys, I know I can nail this.
Yeah, 155.
Again, I just have to think of the movement, and then I'll be fine.
Yeah, you've never seemed at risk for soft elbows during the jerk. It's always really just kind of getting at the thing there in the first place.
Yeah. Basically, whatever I can put on my shoulders, I can basically put up overhead.
Which is cool. That's a cool thing to have.
Yeah.
And then we'll watch this for one final go. It's beautiful. I really like this rep a lot. Up. How do you feel about how much you dip down on your jerk? Do you like that amount of travel?
I don't really even think about it.
It's automatic for you?
Yeah, whenever I go into the jerk, what I did first to begin the jerk as I was learning it was I was trying to press it up off my shoulders, kind of like almost a static press. And that causes a little bit of problems because just the angle of the humerus and all that stuff, and it just kind of pisses off shoulders. We actually had a few people in the meet in the warm-up room who was doing that, and they're complaining about their jerk. And me and Josh kind of went around and showed people like you actually have to shrug up to initiate it, right? And then just catching it with straight arms. Again, the press strength helped with just the stability at the top. And then kind of going into the clean and press too, learning that, this little trick with the jerk kind of translated into that too. And that helped me a lot.
Yeah, that's something that I ended up taking that from like a jerk teaching progression of telling people to get it off their shoulders by jumping and shrugging together. You can kind of steal that from the power clean, but I also do that for like the Olympic press now too. When they're coming out of the balance, I will tell people that they're trying to throw not just their hand, but their shoulder up at the ceiling as well. So when they're coming, it's this big unified motion between everything. I find that really kind of makes things click. Let's see. We got a comment from G Lock. Chase, did you put thought into your clothes you were wearing aside from the shoes and belt? Yeah. So were they specific about like I know this? So for example, people who don't know this, but like if you are in a powerlifting competition, briefs will not be allowed. You have to, or excuse me, boxers, excuse me. I mean, you have to wear briefs. So like cheeks showing type of briefs, so that you can't use them to get any sort of spring. Was there any sort of regulation like that for you guys?
No, just long socks in case like you bleed in the bar or to protect the shins. Basically, any area that has a lot of contact with the bar and skin, we want you to cover. So I had to wear shirts. I actually was a couple days before the meet. I want to get like the old timey singlets that like like the Russians, the Soviets used
Yeah.
to wear. So like I was going down into some weird, deep,
Internet
dark.
rabbit hole.
Yeah, it was getting bad. So I was like, nah, I can't wear this. It's too revealing.
Yes.
Um,
What you got to find is an old Greco-Roman wrestling singlet.
yeah.
So when we think of old timey singlets, they're like the Greco ones where it's just like this weird tiny
Mhm.
Y. It's like all the way down to the side. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any
But
Greco guys out there?
But other than that, I just wore a shirt underneath that I always train in, something I'm familiar with.
Hmm.
I feel like people going into a meet will sometimes change what they're doing, which is stupid. It should just be another day in training almost, right? Maybe a little bit more with the nerves, more anticipation and stuff. Typical stuff that you kind of find yourself going into a heavy lift. But as far as the stuff that you can control, yeah, it should just be just like training, man. Same thing in the sense of how you warm up, from what you wear.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like you don't want to introduce a new breakfast, you don't want to try a
Yeah.
new energy drink, you don't want to do anything different. But Jay Russell in the chat said today's Q&A is special for me since I've had a low back injury since April of this year. I'm assuming it's been hard to lift since then. That's why videos haven't been coming. Jay Russell, that seems to be a little bit of a long time. I'm very interested to hear what's going on with that. So you can, he said, so he has some more details here. Let's see. It's actually something I got 2 years ago because a trainer made me do too much deadlifting volume. After that, I started SS, but it returned some months ago. I don't know if I want to classify it as it, because like, let's say even if you didn't pulverize one of your facet joints, and even if you
Mm,
did, it would be healed within 2 years. If for some reason you had a tear in your disc and a herniated disc, all of that fluid from the nucleus would have been sucked back in by that point. two
yeah.
years, it's not the same it anymore. It's just another back injury. It may feel the same because back injuries are pretty consistent. But yeah, we'll definitely talk about all that stuff. So the topics that we want to run through today, your boy Chase, we covered him. Strain versus pain. This will be kind of a big one. How to select weight on the bar, flukes versus trends, and then variables and changes to make after that. Um, Chase, you probably have to deal with this one a lot in in-person coaching, especially if you're dealing with people who haven't really trained before. How do you describe to people how lifts should feel when it comes to like pain or strain or effort levels and things like that?
At the start, we kind of referred to it as like the honeymoon, right? This is especially too for like someone who's a complete ranked novice. Anything they do is going to get them better. It's going to tax the whole entire system and make them stronger. This kind of lasts. Again, we kind of covered this whenever we did training and kind of more programming program kind of talk, and it's about 2 to 3 months that you're going to have that little bit of a honeymoon, right? And then things start changing after that. You get into like that advanced novice phase, and then people really find out like, and, we call it nut cutting time in the sense that shit gets heavy, right?
Yeah.
You kind of have to then find yourself in a mental avenue in the sense that this is more of a mental game instead of you training your body at this point.
Hugely is a mental game. It really is. And this is one of the things that Rip says about like take a video, watch it, have a trusted advisor there, have them watch it. Bar speed really matters. So even if you think something feels super difficult, but the bar speed is moving exactly the same, you're likely in this strain category where you're like, I feel like I'm in pain, I feel like I'm gonna die.
Mm,
But in reality, it's just hard.
yeah.
When you pull your lifetime deadlift PRs or your 20 rep squat PR, if you're doing something crazy, or if you're doing your lifetime press PR or whatever, it's not going to feel comfortable by any stretch of the imagination. It's not going to feel like a lift that is easy and super smooth, and it feels like something that you could repeat a few times in a row, because then by definition, it's not a limit event. So the first time that you do a deadlift that takes 5-6 seconds, it may feel like, or you may misinterpret that, like, oh, I'm in pain. This is wrong. Something is not functioning correctly. Whereas in reality, it's just kind of strain. I'll notice this basically as people are leaving the novice phase into the intermediate phase, because they're used to, like Chase was saying, going 225, 235, 245, then 5 pound jumps from there all the way up to the low threes. And once they have to start really fighting for things, they'll assume the next day, I mean, my lower back was really sore, or during that
Mhm.
set, I really felt my lower back. It's like you probably did feel it, but that's okay. That's kind of in the strain category.
Yeah.
How do you start identifying? So, like, let's say when someone comes to you in the gym and they're like, I feel like I'm having a lot of lower back pain recently, knee, ankle, shoulder, whatever. How do you start differentiating those things and kind of, figuring that being out as more real?
Pain's more of a lingering thing. With a strain, right? It's more of like a pump, or kind of just like more of a soreness where it lasts maybe at the most um, 3 days, 2 days, and it
Hmm.
gradually decreases. Right? It's not the same level of acute pain, essentially, or stress throughout those 3 days duration. Right? Pain is you can feel it basically in any movement almost, depending on the pain or what area is infected with the pain. But it lingers more so than strain. And how to digress, like how what movement is causing that pain, making sure like all the diagnostic angles that we see as coaches aren't changing too much as we're lifting. For example, like your knees aren't doing anything funky in the squat, that your elbows aren't flaring out too much at the bench. And that's just kind of what we see as coaches, and making sure that we're getting you as close as possible to the model that's going to get you pain free, essentially.
Hmm. Yeah, pain is something that's like, first of all, it's very hard to define. It's like everybody knows what it is.
Yeah.
I always tell people where it's just like, if we dropped you into like the middle of Africa or the middle of China or the middle of, Scanda, whatever, and then you like hold your lower back and you're like, they will know exactly what you mean there, right? It could be
Hmm.
someone who has zero language or cultural tools that you do. If you make the I hurt my lower back, they'll understand what's going on, because it's super common, it's super ubiquitous. The thing that I always like to say to people is that if it doesn't seem to be recovering on a similar pattern to your muscular soreness, then it may be something for us to start paying attention to, right? So it's like if at the third squatting session for the week, you're like, yeah, my quads are a little sore, glutes and hamstrings just feel kind of like tight and stiff. By Monday, they're like good to go. But let's say, for example, that kind of like lingering ankle pain that I'm having, that, for example, that will stay maybe until like Tuesday or Wednesday, or until I take another light day or something like that. So if it seems to not match a similar pattern to the rest of your muscular soreness, then it's likely something that we should start investigating. Um, Theodore has said something here. Let's see what's up. He said, "Is it normal for a strain to be debilitating to the point you can't walk and have cramping? Mid back strain, it's gone now, but was a very scary experience." Yeah, so like the severity of like throwing your back out is the societal term that we use, or a back strain or a back tweak, whatever you want to call it. That can be quite high, that can be quite low. That's a super individual thing. I don't
Hmm.
know if I could comfortably correlate that to like tissue damage. So it's to say that mid back was 3 disc herniations and something else was 2, and then this one was 1. It's not necessarily like a pec tear. And you're like, okay, it tore in the muscle belly, or it tore at this tendon, or it tore at this tendon. Like it's we don't know that literally, especially when it comes to these pain issues. But that's not super abnormal, I don't think, to have it be like, oh yeah, walking is a little bit uncomfortable for a few days.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the cramping, that's kind of a sympathetic thing just from the pain experience, but that definitely does happen. Yeah, so the next thing I wanted to cover was weight on the bar. What do you start to do whenever people, for example, so let's say someone comes in and they're starting to complain of like some knee aching or elbow aching on the bench and the squat respectively. Where do you go with weight on the bar?
If they're coming in without them bleeding from anywhere or anything dangerous, just like you were saying, yeah, we're just basically going to find a weight that feels on the brink of discomfort, right? And we're going to work through it, and then the majority of the time, as they start to warm up, their knee pain, quote unquote, goes away, and then we can usually do the working set that we plan for that day, or we do a modification. Let's say we're doing like a 3x5, maybe that day we do a 3x3 or a 5x3, something in that sense, to where maybe it's the volume as we get deeper into it is stressing it to the point where it's uncomfortable for the person. There's a lot of ways that we can kind of work around it with the reps and sets avenue. I try not to take away too much weight on the bar, because again, that's a huge mental hurdle for the client. And if it is kind of serious, it takes a while to work up from that point. But if it's not, I don't want them getting any weaker than what they need to be.
Yeah, exactly. Because you have someone kind of in this early LP phase, and it's like, hey, we'll touch on it in the next point, like flukes versus trends. But if someone's having an off day and they're like, yeah, my knee feels really wonky today, it's like, yeah, I mean, let's say we can just keep the same weight on the bar, we can negotiate for that same weight, but let's just do doubles or triples and just a bunch of them rather than grinding for a set of 5. So it's kind of like how exactly we want to. All roads lead to Rome. In this case, being stimulus. We have a lot of ways to get there. You can keep the weight on the bar, increase the sets, lower the reps. You can increase the reps, lower the set count. There's a bunch of things. And that's a lot of a personality dependent thing too. Like if you can tell someone's being a little cranky and it's like, all right, can you muster one good set for me? Then you may keep a medium weight on the bar, do a relatively higher rep set, and then just call it a day. It's enough stimulus to hold them off and then just move on to the next lift. That's kind of it's a personality thing a lot of the times. But weight on the bar, if it can stay, it stays. But if you're kind of guiding through this yourself, and you kind of once you're past this novice phase, and you're not in a rush. Like if you were Chase a few weeks ago, and the option is, oh man, my wrist, I feel like I have a boo boo in my wrist. What should I do? Keep the weight on the bar, deal with it, right? But if you don't have a competition coming up, you don't need to be married to the weight on the bar. Now, the next thing, this kind of plays into the reset. This plays into the first 3 questions. This thing is kind of quite important. Not too many people have covered this, I don't think, at least in written format. Figuring out if it was a fluke, a bad performance was a fluke, or if it's kind of a trend that is emerging. So like, let's say one day you come in and you feel like you are 50 pounds weaker than you normally are, and it's a Monday. And then you kind of have to do that accounting of like, all right, well, what happened this weekend? What exactly was I doing that caused this fuck up? How do you think with pain, Chase? Or how many times, for example, do you think it kind of, it makes itself presentable as a trend versus just a random one-off?
With the pain aspect, it's going to be more trending because again, pain, it's a lingering thing depending on just what you've done to yourself, how you fucked yourself up versus like the flukes. It could be from as simple as someone didn't eat the morning before, hasn't ate since yesterday's dinner, and that's kind of thrown them off. Or just like they have this little acute sickness to where they've maybe just have allergies and their head's all wonky and stuff like that.
Like a headache can make everything feel worse, even if your body's totally fine.
But yeah, on the pain trends and stuff, you'll notice that, right? And kind of going back on the person's personality, like what Alex touched, is that you have a guy who has a type A personality, comes in, always nails his shit, just kind of jokes around with you, and then the next day, he just kind of is more reserved, more quiet. This is not really a fluke because you have a bunch of alarms going off saying like, why is Bob here not acting the same how he was 2 sessions ago? And then you ask him and you find out, he's had this lingering thing that he's been trying to keep secret from you because he doesn't want to take the weight off the bar type thing.
Yeah, a lot of people will do that and then think that things are irrelevant. So they'll be like, oh yeah, my right quad was hurting for like a week. And then all of a sudden on the 4th squatting session that week, I tweaked my knee and now I don't feel like squatting for 2 weeks. And it's like, right, well, that the information process, the information handoff should happen as soon as that quad pain starts, maybe the day after it starts, just to be a little bit safe. But there's a lot of that stuff to figuring out trends, especially when you do have a coach in a coaching relationship to work through. So in terms of flukes versus trends, there's a lot of things that are going to impact acute performance. Acute performance being like your individual session within that day at the gym. All of them can also impact your pain experience, right? So like if Chase was saying, like if you do have a little bit of a head cold and you had a bad day at work, if your ankle was like a little bit cranky during a squat or some power cleans during the landing, it's going to feel significantly worse. Not to trick anybody and be like it's going to, not to nocebo anybody, but like it's possible. I know that if I have a headache for whatever reason and I go into train, whenever I'm bracing, that headache's going to get worse and worse and worse. And maybe some neck pain, it may be some shoulder pain, whatever. But there's a lot of acute factors to your performance, including what you've eaten that day, what your work day has been like. Did you have a fight with your wife the night beforehand? What happened? Did the dog run away? All of that crazy stuff that's going to impact that. And generally, it only causes to amplify it, right? So there's not many people, not many personalities out there where it's like, I broke up with my long-term girlfriend last night, and today at the gym, I am feeling great.
Yeah.
Maybe if the relationship was really bad. But in a normal circumstance, it's going to generally make everything feel a little bit worse. So that's what we like to do whenever we're establishing like a fluke. So it's like if you just misgrooved a rep, it's not like you were too weak to do the rep. You just screwed that rep up.
Mhm.
Um, it's that when you're talking about flukes in terms of pain, you have to be really generous with your analysis. Don't automatically think that you snapped your spine up because of a fluke, 2 flukes in a week because you were having a bad week. And then I guess we'll start talking about the variables and changes that we can start getting into. Go back to here. Thomas Stavel. Hi, gents. In your experience, on average, until what weight do lifters add 5 pounds to every squat session on the NLP? What do you think, Chase?
On average, until what weight do? I'm kind of confused about this question. In your experience, on average, until what weight do lifters add 5 pounds to every lift?
He's saying it a little bit in reverse, but it's like basically it's how long does the LP last for the squat
Oh, okay.
until you have to start micro loading, quote unquote,
Yeah,
below
I
5
got
pounds.
you. Again, this kind of depends on the person. On average, though, if we don't have a guy who's real young or is not really a good freaky athlete, we'll probably start changing up the squat to where they're not adding 5 pounds every session, maybe 2 months, a little less than 2 months into the novice on your program.
Yeah. I'd say that's about fair. Of course, it's going to depend if you have Aunt Meredith coming in, and then her LP is going to end at 65 pounds, starting at a goblet squat. You have no idea. But if I would say we're talking about like the average, like early 30s, late 20s man, I would say mid to high 200s, and if they did aggressive weight gain, it could be higher than that. But you never know until you know. I personally like to cut that off a little bit earlier. I like to go to 5 pound jumps earlier than I would have to, because again, you're still getting a lot of value out of those more sub-maximal squats, and like it's not going to kill anybody. It'll come out in the wash of training, and it'll make that basically run at the LP. It'll give them more time to focus on technique and less time with weight on the bar. So I want to run through all the lifts here. We're going to do squat, bench press, deadlift. There's the only 4 that exist. We may find others. Science, we're not sure yet. But with these 4, I want to go through all the tools that we can vary and play around with if someone is having pain. So one thing that you're going to see on all of these lifts is it's going to say partial or range of motion. For the deadlift, it'll say range of motion or some partial. So like if just the bottom of the squat is hurting for you and you can very much so identify it, you can just do a partial squat, right? So let's say your working weight is 100 pounds, right? And you can do partials. You can do partials with 100 pounds, and then you can do full range with, say, 60 pounds to help you rehab that bottom portion of the range of motion. Now, with the partial, you can do a pin squat or a box squat. Chase, do you have thoughts about either or?
The vast majority of my experience is that I use a lot of box squatting. Pin squatting, not as much. Maybe for some instances, kind of like adductors, they're kind of tricky to where a certain range of motion, maybe that's to the point where I can't put the box high enough or kind of low enough in the sense that, I can low enough with some boxes, but the pin has a little bit more variation in that aspect. But with box squatting, again, this kind of just goes into the part of the movement pattern that people are fucking up on the squat, and that's their knees, right? So having them sit and really locate and give that tactile feedback of, look, your hips need to be in this position at this height, and this is going to assume the correct knee angle and just where the knees need to be in general.
Yeah, it can kind of act like a tubo, the terribly useful block of wood, but for the hips. So basically the problem with box squats is you need sturdy boxes. And if you're in a garage gym by yourself, you may be able to, you'll definitely be able to use the bench that you're bench pressing on and stack some stuff up on top of there. But like if you're in a commercial gym setting, you have a bunch of boxes, that's great. If you want to finely tune stuff and then not need kind of resources to sit on, the pin squat basically solves that problem. The pin squat's tricky because it can kind of pull the bar off your back unless you're kind of adept at it. But if the range of motion is bothering at a certain point, change the range of motion, do a partial. Now for a tempo, we have pause squats, and then generally people will alter the speed for the descent. I never really like to alter the speed on the ascent on the way up. I find that's a little bit silly. I think if you're doing a squat, do it as fast as you can on the way up. Not to say if you're just getting over like a hamstring tear, you should be trying to doing ballistic squats, but you get the point. Bar position. So this is one that you will see it with kind of cranky shoulders, and this ties into grip. So like someone's doing the low bar grip, it gets cranky, and you can't seem to fix it. You can switch to a high bar squat or a front squat. How often do you kind of have to? Do things ever really get severe enough for you in that troubleshooting process, Chase, where like the grip becomes too much of an issue, then you have to change the bar position?
Basically, we see this what the grip the person can handle right off the bat with like shoulder flexibility on their teaching progression, right? So whenever they first come into the door, I know like as soon as they go underneath the bar, they stop right there. Yeah, we're gonna high bar.
Yeah,
So I'll
in half a second. It's the
yeah,
funniest thing. Yeah.
it's pretty for certain. And then over time, it's just the flexibility that nags and kind of makes people feel uncomfortable. That soon goes away pretty soon. The vast majority, though, is I get people who've come in and they've learned this on their own. They have the wrist in either flexion to where their wrist is barely hanging onto the bar. Their hands aren't solidified on the bar, or they're letting their elbows kind of brunt the load, and they're getting elbow tendonitis from that. That takes a little bit more time and kind of more mental thought of what you're doing as you're squatting to fix that.
hmm Yeah. So like the grip position, it's such a huge one. I think that I would be interested for someone to do some analytics on startingstrength.com. We have to have the most articles on squat grip.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like Pete Trupos' one of his last articles was, I think, yet another squat grip article was the title for that one. I remember laughing at that for like 5 minutes when he came out with that one. But yeah, the squat grip, we have a ton of resources on it. But like an example of what you can do. So it's like, let's say if you screwed up and you irritated the hell out of your shoulders or elbows with low bar, you can just move it up at 2 inches, inch and a half, and then squat like
Yeah.
that for a few weeks. It's not the end of the world. If give that, let your time, have your elbows cool off, do the rest of the elbow work that you can. And then let's say, for example, if you have some sort of shoulder tweak, let's say you tweak it playing flag football or chasing your kid around or something, and you just can't get your arms back here really at all, you probably switch to a front squat and have it be somewhat comfortable. Scapular protraction versus retraction, the forward position is probably somewhat comfortable. So if you still need a squat, what are you going to do? You can switch to a front squat if you screwed your shoulders up. And then for the grip, definitely check out all those articles like we were talking about. So the thumbs, thumbs around, bending the wrists, all of that stuff. And then I would say one of the last things to do is changing the implement.
Yep.
So like we were talking about with the bar position, we have the last resorts are like the safety bar, and then a goblet squat. The goblet squat is really reserved for people who are generally unable to put any sort of barbell on their back. Right. So if you are too weak to do a 45-pound squat, which is a lot of people, and that's totally okay, you can do a goblet squat, and that's fine. And then you'll work your way up for that. Chase, did you ever end up working in a commercial gym, or did you go straight to starting strength gym in your coaching career? Did you ever?
No, I mean it's always been at starting strength gyms.
Okay. Did you guys ever play around with the safety bar? Did you guys ever have those around?
We did have a few. I actually had a guy in Houston who had rotator cuff surgery, and again, shoulder extension was impossible for him. I think he tore like his supraspinatus or his subscapularis, one of the two. And yeah, just the safety bar squat bar was perfect for him. He didn't have any discomfort, no pain at all from just holding the bar essentially in the front rack, quote unquote, and then able to squat like that.
Yeah, the safety bar, it's a great thing. I just have one of my guys recently, he may be watching this, he had to switch over to the safety bar because of nagging shoulder pain. In the troubleshooting process, this is one of the last things that I like to change. The safety bar, it definitely carries over the low bar. If you add 100 pounds to your safety bar, you'll add some amount to your low bar squat for sure. But the practice of holding that weight on your back, it's pretty valuable. So that's some of the last things to change there. Then we'll move on here to the bench. A lot of these things are pretty similar, so we won't touch on it for terribly long because we're already like 40 minutes into this thing. But we'll go through to start. Partials, we have the pin press, the board press, and the Spotto press. The board press is getting a piece of wood, sticking it on your chest. You can tape it there. You can put it under your shirt. You can have a friend put it there, and then you bench to it. It basically just makes you pretend that you have another 2 inches of pec or another 4 inches of pec. And then the Spotto press. The Spotto press by Eric Spotto is stopping the bar early. So you pretend that you have some boards there. You stop it like 2 to 4 inches off the chest, depending on what you're doing, and then pressing it back up. Chase, how often do you find yourself going to a pin press, board press, something like that?
Hardly ever for messing with someone's pain. It's more so, and we'll kind of touch this here in a little bit, just affecting the grip. But I use pins and stuff like that to help with if let's say someone had a bone spur or something, to where maybe the full range of motion hurts him at the bottom, and then maybe 2 inches, 3 inches off the chest that doesn't, I'll probably make him do a pin bench at that point.
Yeah, yeah. Pin benches, it's a super convenient one. Pin squats are a lot of times hard for people to
Yeah.
pull off. Maybe with the height, pin bench is really convenient.
Yep.
Board press, as I never really use that. It's kind of an over
Me either.
as a rehab movement. It's a really good overloading movement. Like if you just need someone to get practice with a heavy weight in their hands, kind of similar to a slingshot. And then Spotto press, I have a few advanced guys using that, but not super frequent. Interesting facts by Theodore. Eric Spotto is a famous arm wrestler as well as a bencher. I didn't know he did arm wrestling. That's pretty cool.
Hmm.
Yeah, and then we have tempo. So, like, unlike the squat, I never really find myself modifying the tempo on the way up. I use a lot of pauses on the squat. With the bench, you can modify the ascent a good bit, right? So if someone has cranky shoulders, you don't want them throwing the bar as fast as they can, right? Especially if
Hmm.
you have to pull the weight back. So pause. You can vary all the descent speeds. Chase, you said you vary the grip around a lot. So like the
Hmm.
grip width. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, we actually have a lady in the morning classes who we just found out had torn her rotator cuff just a little bit. So again, she kind of has this weird anthropometry in her arms to where she kind of flares out a little bit already. So having a narrow grip kind of helps get the elbows in a position to where it's not pulling or messing or impinging rather with the rotator cuff musculature. Um, Wide, I've never really done anything. Usually wide will kind of create more problems as you go into it. um if a person's feeling anything in their pecs or so. Then thumbs, yeah, I've never made anyone take a suicide grip or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Just mainly
Yeah,
affecting the width, making it more narrow.
yeah, more narrow is a great way to basically kind of pull moment off the shoulder, and then most people will develop shoulder problems from benching before anything else.
Hmm.
I threw the wide in there. It's a really good way to kind of reduce load or stress on the elbow. So for some people, if they do a lot of kind of like, let's say if I'm angling the camera, if all their grip works here, they get cranky elbows, they can pull the grip in a little bit. That extra closed elbow angle may be irritating. You may have to try a more open elbow angle. So the grip width, it will modify the touch point, but it will also modify the elbow angle at the bottom. So if it's normally like this and it gets more open, that could theoretically be a little bit less stress kind of on the tricep, but it could be more stress on the bicep. So it's something to definitely play with. And it does shorten the range of motion. And then the thumbs thing, I've never seen really anyone get too many wrist problems from the bench, but I
No.
hear about it all the time. And then that seems to be, I think it's like the gym bro solution is the suicide grip for uncomfortable grips on the bench. I never really recommend it. Are there any good kind of concise articles on the bench grip on the website?
Actually, just thinking about this, I've had a lot of people with bicep pain
Yeah.
from benching and stuff. So I'll have them more pronate instead of the supination with just how they set their arms or their hands rather on the bar. That's probably the only thing that I change about their grip with their hands rather,
Hmm.
is a little bit more pronation. But yeah, I've never had anybody not be able to grab the thing without their thumbs. And anything, I'll make them wrap their wrist if they have grip issues or anything like that.
Yeah, we can't really wrap elbows or shoulders. You can put an
Yeah.
elbow sleeve on. So like the really nice thing about wrist, it's like it's kind of hard for problems to aggregate there because you can just fucking mummify the thing and it feels pretty nice. Frost Nixon from 1986 said, "Oh man, talking about injuries, he finished a session and waited 24 hours, went to work out again, felt a pain above his right glute. Only feel it when I deadlift, not in the squat." Hmm. Send in a video, man.
Yeah.
I'd be interested to see that. Um, yeah, if it's that specific, that's always interesting. Especially like, I feel like if you have most people with a lower back tweak, if they feel it in one movement, they'll feel it in the other.
Mhm.
It's interesting that's only in one movement. Yeah. So the other thing we have a lot more things to play with the bench. These are all the possible things we can play with. We can also change the incline. So there's an incline bench and a decline bench that exists in the world. Andy Baker had a really good article about training. I think it was very obese people, emergency weight loss trainees, and then also older people. So like an older person, if you get a very old guy, having him lay all the way down flat on his back, that may be like an event. He may be used to sleeping in a recliner or a couch, and then getting him up is going to require people helping him pull himself up. So an incline bench may be significantly easier for everybody, right? He's only going to be laying down a little bit. It's not going to be kind of as embarrassing as kind of like you're like a turtle to get yourself back up. So you can definitely play with the incline. I use the incline bench as a tool to take weight off the bar. So if it's an absolute loading problem, so if you're benching 365 normally and it's starting to irritate your wrists, shoulders, elbows, try incline bench for a block. It'll pull 80 pounds off the bar, and then that may help. I've never really used the decline in programming ever. Chase?
I never have either. More so
Yeah,
just the incline
yeah.
with someone who, again, had shoulder issues.
Yeah, the decline bench exists. That's about as much as I can say for it.
Yeah.
Decline sit-ups, very fun. How about that? And then again, there's a lot of other variations we can play with. So the football bar, if that level of pronation on your wrist is hurting either the wrist or the elbow, you can switch to a neutral gripped bar, the football bar, the Swiss bar. That's always an option. And then dumbbells, if you can do a dumbbell bench, let's say if you're having some of the above problems and you can't solve it with the triage there, and then I guess you can theoretically go to the push-up as the last resort, right? So. Chase, have you used the football bar kind of in programming for people if they ever have any tweaks? Okay.
Never have. Usually, the vast majority of the problem is just the movement pattern itself getting associated with the touch point, where the elbows are, and getting set up on the bench correctly. Those are the big problems that I kind of see on the bench. It's never like maybe if someone had like a hook for a hand, then I'd probably like use a football bar, or some modification there. But the vast majority, it's just getting them the correct setup.
Yeah, it's definitely very exotic. It's not something like whenever we're doing these things, it's not in a precise order, but like this is generally the order of like most common to least common.
Yep.
For the bench, the grip should be a little bit higher, but for the squat, the last one, that was basically it. Like change the range of motion, change the tempo, then you can start changing all the crazy stuff. I have one guy using the football bar right now because again, we're still trying to troubleshoot what's going on with his kind of shoulder pain. But dumbbell benching, it's a fine accessory. Push-ups, fine accessory. Football bench, it exists. And then the touch point, that's also something to mention. If someone has and this also, I think what Chase was saying, it plays into a correct or an incorrect or more incorrect movement pattern. If someone has a really wonky touch point, if they've been touching it really low, that can cause a lot of like unevenly distributed joint stress, especially if they're touching way too low, or if they're touching way too high and their elbows are super closed. So what like Chase was saying, change the touch point to the more correct area. Deadlift. Do you recognize this guy, Chase?
I don't know.
I don't know who this is. I think this was like his 1 rep max deadlift at the time.
Probably.
What year was this, do you think?
Fuck, man. It's probably 17, maybe just turned 18.
So what was that, last year? When was this?
I'm 23 now, so about like 5 years ago.
Okay, he's making 405 look real light here. Nice delt lighting, half natty lighting. It's a good picture. This comes up when you look up starting strength deadlift. I just did it. It's confirmed. Yeah, man. So we got the range of motion changes here. We got a block pull, a rack pull, and the deficit. What do you think you typically use, Chase?
Rack pull, for sure. Mm-hmm. And again, this kind of helps with figuring out just the main issues that we see with pain or regarding pain is someone's fucking up the movement, right? They are like I see people in the chat here, like some of y'all can't set your back properly. With a rack pull, it's a higher range of motion. It's a lot easier for someone to feel the low back extension or the thoracic extension, how to pull with their lats and not just cat back it up. With the deficit, I've never really used that before, just more of just like a training exercise or a tool. And then blocks, just in case someone has one bar and they don't have a bent bar or just a type of rack that doesn't allow them to manipulate the range of motion as accordingly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you have like a step ladder rack or like a half rack pulls are kind of out of the question. You got to go to the block pull. I agree with Chase on the deficit. I never really used the deficit as kind of a tool to I don't want to call it rehab necessarily, but basically that. But we'll use the deficit to just pull weight off the bar. So if someone's like, my back is cranky and I'm pulling at like 85% intensity every time I pull, we can do a deficit. It'll pull 150 pounds off the bar, something like that, and then ta-da, everything will feel a little bit better. We got a question from Melchior Kaspar, the resident wizard on the stream. Any tips for my friend? Limited range of motion in his right scapula due to years of inactivity and computer usage, those darn computers, and general pain in that area when training, especially the bench. What do you think, Chase?
I just feel like he's maybe very kyphotic. So benching in a kyphosis that's really extreme is going to be hard for him. Getting him to have scapular retraction, maybe he's never done that before, showing that, and more so just thoracic extension. Again, if he has like kyphosis, is going to be real hard for him.
Yeah, he may not be warming up his shoulders enough, and then he may end up trying to bench and be like, "Oh, it hurts as soon as I'm benching," and then he may just not be warm enough. If it's very possible the guy can like deadlift 250, but his bench is like 65 pounds. That they exist. So make sure he's hanging off the chin-up bar. Have him do some very, very light activity to kind of get his shoulders warm enough. It's very rare for someone to neurologically not be able to elevate their scapula. It's exceedingly rare. Same thing with pulling the shoulder backwards. If they're like a big kind of flesh-bound person, you may see that a little bit more, but you also just don't need to focus on it as much, right? So if it's like a big guy, exactly. Yeah, like it's press more, get him to really shrug his shoulder up at the press, and then chances are he'll kind of learn to better control his shoulder in space.
Yep.
So the tempo for the deadlift, pause deadlifts, like a 2-count pause pull, like you pull it off the floor an inch, you pause there, then some tempo on the ascent. I never tell people to throttle the descent unless they're doing a very light Romanian deadlift, Chase?
Yeah, same.
Same. Okay. And then we have the grip. So you can do the standard grip where the arms are vertical. You can do a clean grip where you're about a hands width outside of that, and you can go all the way to the snatch grip. I think I would only really use these in terms of ways to make the bar lighter if you need to figure out a way to get weight off the bar. A snatch grip deadlift, if you're doing it correctly, the hips are really high because you have very short arms now. So if you have like a lower back tweak, that's probably not the best thing in the world for you. And then the stance, excuse me, I guess you can go all the way from like a frog stance of being like super narrow all the way out to sumo, and you can kind of vary that all the way in. Chase, do you ever find yourself varying stance width, like even an inch or so in either direction?
A little bit. It's just to get someone into a better location with their hips. Let's say someone who has like a torso of like an inch and legs that are like 5 feet long. They're gonna have kind of a weird, difficult time getting set up, and maybe get them into a better setup in the sense that I widen out their stance a little bit, or affect the toe angle to kind of help get them in position, and they're not using their back ineffectively. They're putting too much moment on the back to where they can't handle that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Basically, it says like what we're trying to do is to modify the hip height. The stance width has no virtue on its own. Modifying the hip height and then the back angle is really what matters. So the reason why sumo feels a lot easier for people is because the back angle is very vertical and then the hips are quite low, or at least as compared to the conventional pull. So if we modify it from like a frog stance pull, like all the way here, that can really help someone get the knees shoved out. But if we need to dissipate some femur length, we can move the hands all the way out. And then the grip, things we can modify in the grip. We can go double overs. We can go over under, hook grip, and then straps. Do you get a lot of people who talk about hand pain in the deadlift? Is that a common thing?
Hardly. I think maybe one person, and that was because they were slamming it down and kind of really extending the wrist or the bones of the forearm, or like jamming into the bar.
Yeah.
But that was like a quick, simple fix, and it's just like, hey, don't do that.
Don't do that. Yeah.
It was pretty simple.
There's a lot of coaching that comes down to saying, don't do that.
Yeah. Actually, Tidor brought up a good point with, he actually asked the question, how real is the chance of tearing your biceps using the alternative grip on the deadlift? I have a lot of people ask me that, and there is a chance of doing that if you've never learned how to effectively squeeze your lats and keep your elbows straight while you're getting set up. Most of these people are guys who are just learning how to deadlift, and they've yanked it off the bar, so there's already going from a slack bicep to a real tight one, and that's what's causing the rupture.
Yeah, basically do not very suddenly load your bicep with deadlift weights. Right. So if you've been like chronically cutting fluids for a competition for some reason, and everything in your body is very dehydrated, maybe not the best idea. In normal human circumstances, it's a negligible risk. And we'll move on to the press. By the way, if you guys didn't know this, Starting Strength has these posters out, which I think are like super clean and super aesthetic, hanging up in your gym. This is the pressing one. I just really like this one. I couldn't find a good image for the press, so we're using this. The press, the partials. Not many options. There's no box press. It's just the pin press. Just the pin press. Chase, how often are you using the pin press for things like this?
As a kind of a tool for recovery, hardly ever. It's just mainly just another coaching tool to help progress the weight.
Okay. If someone had pain at the bottom of the press, at their bottom position, would you pull weight off the bar and do the full range, or would you go to a pin press and then do more full range in the back end? What do you think?
I'd probably do a pin press.
Okay.
Just kind of maybe if someone's shoulders are kind of nagging them and they're really deconditioned, let's say old lady, and holding that position with the elbows and putting a lot of strain on the scapula, I just make them pin squat or pin press to where they're
Yeah.
not, as soon as they're done doing the rep, handling that load in their hands.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's something that I think I learned a little bit late. Is it like there's a significant population where holding the press at the bottom is the most stressful part of the movement.
Mhm.
Um, so for them, just like having all of that shit pull on their forearm and their elbow, just holding it there for 2 seconds, that's going to be a lot for them to deal with. And then also, typically with those people, they won't be able to cycle in between reps very quickly. So it's not like if you watch Chase do a set of 5, as soon as it's down, he probably takes one breath and then he's good to go for the next one. There are a lot of people where they need to take like 3 to 5 breaths to collect themselves, get their
Yep.
crap together, and then they'll go. That's holding the bar for a long time. The pin press can be really helpful. And then the grip here. I feel like it'd be pretty rare for people to go more narrow. So I feel like going a finger width wider, 2 fingers width wider may be helpful. And then the same thing with the thumbs. I don't see too many people using suicide grip, but I do see increasing internal rotation or external rotation. How often do you change people away from doing like an Olympic press versus a strict press, things like that?
It depends. Like if someone has tweaked their back, I won't show them, or rather, I'll make them not use the hip motion
Yeah.
because at that point they already have their back agitated, and they'll probably just overextend anyways. Even though they've learned how to effectively use the hips, but they're so concerned about their back that they'll end up doing a little bit more harm than good. So I'll just make them strict.
Yeah. A lot of like very ballistic movement around the spine after a back tweak. Probably not the best idea, especially when it's not the point of the exercise.
Mhm.
It's just like we're not measuring if the hips are going forward 3 inches or 3.5 or 4. It's not super standardized, so it's not like weight on the bar when we're rehabbing something. So if you just tweak your back and you just go into a full blast Olympic press, that could be definitely irritating. And then I guess the other things that we can touch on here are pausing. People with shoulder issues, I really like them to pause at the top and really sink into that shrug. People who typically way too loose at the bottom, you can have them pause. And then I guess the implement, there's a few things that you can do here. Nothing, it's not really going to be like a football bar or a safety bar equivalent for the overhead press. You can switch to a dumbbell and be all the way out here or very in there. That's in a pretty drastic scenario. And then a log press, that's going to function really the same as a pin press. A log press, you start it at your face. So I've only really done that a few times for people who have the strongman equipment in the gym already. If you have it, it's fun. Any parting shots on the press, Chase, for things that you think we should do if there's shoulder pain?
The vast majority of the issues with the press can be fixed with a simple learning of how to shrug, right? And effectively shrugging correctly, it's going to stop like 95% of the issues that you're going to face.
Amen, sister. So when are you trying to introduce that into the movement? I know we do it with the teaching pressure, but I mean like physically within the movement itself. Do you want people to get all the way to the top and then shrug, or do you want them to start shrugging during the movement?
I want them to kind of shrug during the movement, right? So
Yeah.
then they associate it with just a clean punch upwards. That's what I kind of cue instead of turning it into a two-parter because then they stop and then they think, which is fine when the weights are light, but as soon as they're going for like a heavy attempt with singles and stuff, this is too much things to think about.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it is incredibly distracting to have to like finish a lift, think you're done, stop there for a second, and then have to do another second thing. Like we don't
Yeah.
want the shrug to be we don't want the shrug to be the secondary movement that you're doing at the top. Like if your elbows are completely locked out, it's almost a little bit too late to shrug. I like to do it basically at the exact same time. I'll tell people to shrug it off their chest. So when they're here, think about punching
Mhm.
it up and off with their shoulder. That way, by the time they get to the top, the shoulder's already at full elevation. The traps are getting some nice work. But yeah, I think that's definitely something that's dramatically overlooked whenever doing the press is exactly when to shrug. We don't want that scapula stapled down at the bottom. Chase, where can we find you at? Where can we follow you? What are you posting?
Chase Linley on Instagram. I haven't posted anything here lately, but as I get into this next training cycle here, I'll start posting more about just kind of like what I'm working on currently, and yeah, just what I've
Do
been
you
doing.
have a training partner? Do you have a reliable training partner?
Kind of. It's my boss, Colby. Shout out to Colby. He usually works out Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, so he'll
Hmm.
be in there, and I'll kind of coach him. But no one really cues me on anything. I would like them to, even though they don't know what the fuck they're looking at right now. Just kind of again, just a standpoint of getting
Yeah.
better as a coaching. But yeah, it's just mainly me.
All right. So it's you. Whenever Cole will be there, you just got to give him the password to your phone, hand him your phone, be like, whenever I'm doing something, film me, even if I don't want you to.
I guess.
Hmm. You just got to do it, man. You just if Phoebe's in there with you, you just got to be like, Phoebe, take my damn phone,
What
and then
it's kind of like a weird perfectionist in me. It's like, man, this rep was so fucking shitty. Like, and it's of course like no one's gonna even notice the difference, but it's like, no, like it's the way I racked that was just terrible. Like I can't do that.
yeah. All right, well, get over your perfectionism. Have Phoebe just run your social media account. We got to see some juicy lifts coming out of it.
Uh,
But yeah, we got to follow your boy Chase at Chase underscore Lindley. Chase does online coaching. If you want to ask him about that, reach out to him. He's also in person coaching in Oklahoma City, right?
yes, sir. Yes,
Okay,
sir.
Oklahoma City. What is it called? It's not the Keystone State, even though it looks like a key. What is the state motto for Oklahoma?
Fuck, I don't know.
We have no idea. Okay, maybe that's
The
it. It's fuck. I don't know.
yeah,
Oklahoma. I don't
the
know.
Indian place. I don't know.
Exactly. We're not sure. But yeah, you can find me at acostrength.com. I do a lot of online coaching. And then Jay Russo, you can definitely email me about your back pain. I'd be more than happy to talk to you about it. I do online coaching, a lot of programming for a lot of athletes. Let me know if you have any questions. And if you would like to get some videos on the show, next week, I think we have a lot of videos to catch up on. We're just going to be doing a full form check episode. So if you guys want to get on there, we have a bunch of videos in the queue. Sending a video to support@strength.club. Put it in Dropbox or just email the file, something like that. But thank you guys very much for watching.
See you guys.